Hey, how you doing, everyone? Welcome back to Big Frog's 4x4. Today we're going to be rotating the tires on the Kia Niro 2017. Now, if you have locking lugs that take a key like this to remove the lug nuts, you should find these in the back of the car underneath the rear panel. You should find this kit. If it's not there, it can also be in your glove box. So check the glove box and underneath the rear floor of your Niro. And it should have the tool and 4 regular lug nuts to replace the locking lug nuts if you don't want those. So this is like a safety key to keep someone from stealing your rims. Underneath your Niro, at each rear and front corner, there is a open spot you'll see in the plastic cladding where you can put jack stands, so you can jack up on the suspension on the back and then put a jack stand underneath right here. And then there's a spot at the front as well. If you're only changing the oil or something, you only have to jack up the front, apply your park brake to the rear wheels, and that way it doesn't roll forward or backward, and even put wheel chocks on the rear wheels just as a safety precaution. And then you can jack up just the front end and change the oil. But if you're changing and rotating the tires, you need all 4 tires off the ground. So you're going to need a jack and 4 jack stands. And then, like I said, at the front, at the rear, there's a cutout right here where you can put your jack stand. And then we'll move to the front here. And you'll see at the front here also, there's a cutout in the plastic where your other jack stand can be placed. Now, if you have a flat alongside the road and you need to use a jack and jack it up, this is also where you would jack it up. Now, because it's easier to film on a lift, I'm going to put it up on the lift. It's easier for the tripod and everything set up, but the procedure is pretty much the same on jack and jack stands. Make sure you use jack stands, not just a jack. We're also going to be using the instruction manual on how to rotate the tires and what corner to corner stuff they want you to do. So we'll cover that here in a moment. Now I'm going to read it exactly what it says in your Kia Niro owner's manual. To equalize tread wear, it is recommended that tires be rotated every 7,500 miles or sooner if irregular wear develops. During rotation, check the tires for a correct balance. When rotating tires, check for uneven wear, damage. Abnormal wear is usually caused by incorrect tire pressure, improper wheel alignment, out of balance wheels, severe braking, or severe cornering. Look for bumps or bulges in the tread or side of tire. Replace the tire if you find either of these conditions. Replace the tire if fabric or cord is visible. After rotation, be sure to bring the front and rear tire pressures to specification and check lug nut tightness. Then I'm going to show you the chart. If you have a regular radial tire, any kind of regular tire, you want to, this is the front of the vehicle. You want to cross your rear tires to the front and bring the fronts straight back. And if you do this every time, the tire will always be in a different corner. So cross the rear to the front and then bring the front straight back. Now, if you have a directional tire installed, a high performance tire usually is a directional tire. Some snow tires are directional tires. Make sure you do just front and rear. Do not swap left and right because that'll change the recommended direction of the tire and they'll wear wrong. So make sure you follow this procedure. Now, while you have these tires off, make sure that you check your brakes and make sure all your brake thicknesses are good because you already got the tires off. You might as well check them. Now, I'm going to be doing this with an impact gun. If you don't have one, you can use a large ratchet because these shouldn't be more than 120 pound-feet or so. If they're tighter than 120 pound-feet, someone put them on too tight. So I'm going to use an impact to take these off. A large ratchet to get these off. It's a 21 millimeter. If you can't get these off of that, you're going to have to pay someone to rotate your tires or go and buy the tools you need. You can get a cordless impact now at Harbor Freight or even on Amazon or something for a fairly decent price. And if this is something you're going to do yourself every 7,500 to 10,000 miles, I highly recommend buying the tool to do the job and make it a lot easier. And then we're done. We'll torque these on with a torque wrench. If you don't have a torque wrench, again, go buy a torque wrench if this is something you're going to do. If you're going to be even doing any kind of car maintenance, it's good to have a 1/4 inch, 3/8, and a 1/2 inch torque wrench. And one that has to go up to at least 120, if you have a pickup truck, 140, 160 pound-feet. Most axle nuts on a lot of vehicles go as high as 220 to 250 foot-pounds or pound-feet of torque. So I would recommend buying several levels of torque wrenches to cover all the ranges of torque that you're going to need while working on a vehicle. Now, this key for your locking lug nut, it only goes on one way. So you're going to put it on, you're going to rotate it until you feel it. Right there, you can feel it. It falls and locks in. Spin until you feel it lock in. And that way you know you're on, and you can put your impact socket on it and your impact gun and run it off. Now I'm going to run all the lug nuts off because that's pretty standard. Everybody should know. If you don't know how to run off your lug nuts, lefty loosey, righty tighty in almost every vehicle. Run off your lug nuts and we'll rotate them. This one will go to the left front. That one will go to the right front. And then the front will come straight to the back. You know how I just mentioned that somebody putting the lug nuts on too tight? This is the first rotation I'm doing on this car since we bought it. So whoever put these tires on at, I don't even know where, ran these lug nuts on way too tight. My air impact wouldn't take them off. I had to get out my 1/2 inch Milwaukee fuel to take them off. But then the problem I ran into is this little locking tool that's supposed to lock into the top of the lug nut. And I knew it was going to be tight since the other lug nut was extremely tight. So I squeezed. I grabbed the hold with that tire and pushed in real hard and tapped the impact trying to get that out. And all it did was round off the inside of this tool. So then I had to come up with another solution. There are tools. I don't have one because it's the first time I ran across one where one of these didn't come out because I always do my own rotations. I had to take a 12-point 1/2 inch deep well 19 millimeter socket. And trust me, it is snug. I mean, I had to pound. Luckily, these are slightly tapered at the top. So you can kind of get it just started on there, and then you pound the living daylights on it to get it to seat all the way onto the lug nut. And that was just tight enough then that I could tap it with the Milwaukee and get it out. But unfortunately now on the first wheel, my tool is junk. It won't work on any other locking lug nuts. So I'm going to have to use the 19 millimeter on the other 3 and hope they all come off. I'm going to do all those before I even take any more lug nuts off to make sure that I'm not going to be kind of up the creek without a paddle without having to buy one of these stripped lug nut removing tools or one of the special tools for removing these when they are stripped out. Now, once they're jammed in there tight, I found a bolt that's the perfect size to fit right down through the middle of that. I'm putting the vise right here on the socket and hitting the bolt and driving the locking lug nut out of the socket. Well, that's a good thing, like I said earlier. The kit comes with 4 standard lug nuts, not the locking style. So guess what's going on in this car? Those 4 regular lug nuts. Now, I don't live in an area that I don't think I've ever heard of someone having their stock rims stolen. So I don't know for sure that that's going to happen, but I seriously doubt it. I have car insurance if it does. But yeah, put the regular lug nuts on. I don't have to worry about this anymore. Once you have your wheels off, you want to examine your back of your rotor here, your hub area. Look for any rust buildup that might be pressing your rotor out crooked at all. Any buildup of rust in here, any rust on where the surface area of your wheel is mounted. If there's any corrosion or rust on the back of your rim, you're going to want to make sure you wire that, brush that off completely clean, and apply a liberal amount of anti-seize to the hub or the back of the wheel before putting it back on. That way it helps prevent, especially if you live in a salt area like oceans or where you get snow and there's salt on the roads. You'll find this as a huge problem. Like you'll take your lug nuts off and there'll be so much corrosion you can't get the rim off without beating it off the hammer. That's how bad it is up here in the Northeast and near the oceans. So make sure you get to that point, clean it all up, and anesthese it before putting your wheels back on. You're going to want to look in between your front and rear brake pads in your caliper here. You'll see the center right there is the rotor. Here's your pad material here and right there. If that is thinner than 2/32, 4/32 is really where I would replace them at. So about the size of the top of a penny to Abraham Lincoln's nose on a penny. It's about 4/32. From the top of the penny down to his head is 2/32. 2/32 is really just too close for comfort. You already got the wheels off. Get the brakes replaced. At 4/32, you have a little bit of time in case you don't have the brakes on hand. You don't have a way to go get them, order them. Get the brakes done at 4/32. Doing the brakes on these would be fairly simple, assuming nothing is rusted tight and your caliper and pins are free. Looks like just, maybe that might be a 13 millimeter and a 15 millimeter. Take your pin bolts out for your caliper. Compress your caliper a little bit and remove it. Then remove your two 13s, look like 13 millimeter bolts back here to hold your mount on. Remove that and your rotor will come off. Then put your new rotor on, clean all the oils that are on the rotor, install your new pads, lubricate the pins that are inside your caliper here, make sure they're working freely, and lubricate with brake lube. You can buy it. It usually comes in little tubes. It might be $1, $1.50 for a little tube when you do your brake jobs. Some brake jobs come with the lube. Do not get any of that lube on the pad material or on your rotor. And apply with a brush or a Q-tip or something your lube to the slide areas where the brakes ride. Now that brake inspection is pretty much going to be the same front and rear. They're almost designed the same. They are going to use different size sockets or wrenches to get the bolts out, but the general idea of removing the caliper, lubricating everything, and removing your caliper mount and the rotor and stuff, all pretty much the same. Now on your inside pad, there most likely will be what they call a squealer. So when the pad gets down below 2/32, it'll start to squeak. So if you ever owned a car that they said, hey, your car needs brakes, and when you were braking, it goes squeak, 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 or a squeak, because it's so low that it's hitting all the time, that's a squealer. And that needs to be, as your tire rotates on the direction that the tire is like rotating. So the tire, when you're driving, is rotating this way, off the bottom. That squealer, that metal bracket, needs to be to the inside on the bottom. If your caliper is on the front and the tire is spinning this way, it has to be on the inside and on the top, because that's the direction that the brake is rotated, rotor is rotating, and it's going to push against that squealer when it gets down to that point. And once you get your wheel back up on and your lug nuts lined up, make sure that your wheel, and keep a little bit of pressure on it, is what they call hub centric. Make sure your center of your wheel is sitting on the hub. Then you can apply your first lug nut. Now that's probably going to be easier without gloves on. It's really cold here, but I can't get my fingers in there with gloves. You could use which I might have to, a shallow 21 millimeter. Yeah, it looks like I'm going to have to because I can't get my fingers in there to get the lug nut started. There we go. So if you have a shallow 21 millimeter, that would probably make it easier with a little extension on the end. But then you want to hold that wheel onto its hub and screw that lug nut on by hand until it's fully seated. And that way you know that your wheel is staying and seated on that hub. You don't want to tighten all your lug nuts down and have it get stuck or crooked on the hub. Sometimes if you do that and it's crooked, you draw it down, you'll see that the wheel jump because it was caught. Well, that means you probably rolled a little piece of aluminum, and so your wheel may not be completely straight. So make sure you get it screwed on there by hand first. Now I'll show you, I got 21 millimeter with an extension on it. You can't use a deep well because it'll fall all the way back down in and you're not going to be able to screw it onto the lug nut. So we got that. I'm going to screw that on by hand and we'll just go around each one. Make it a lot easier than trying to get your fingers in those holes of the wheels. Now, if you're going to use an impact, air or electric, make sure you set it to its lowest setting and do not over torque. You just want to run the wheels on where they're snug against the wheel. You're not doing your final torque with your impact. So with like the Milwaukee Fuel, this is the first gen, it has a setting 1 and 2. I have it set to power 1. And you'll see it just kind of, you'll hear it just kind of clicks. That's it. Or on your other torque wrench, like I said, you just want to drive that down just to where the wheel is tight against the hub, but not fully torqued. The torque wrench is when you're going to finally do the final torque. Now your lug nut torque is 95 pound-feet. I'm going to start at the top and work your way around a cross pattern. Top, bottom, always across from each other. Now when you're done torquing all of your lug nuts, each wheel, cross pattern, 95 pound-feet. Make sure you crank your torque wrench back down to 0 and store it at 0 or at just below its lesser number. The torque wrench I just used, the last number is 30. So I crank it down a few past 30 till everything is released on the inside, and that's where you stop. Never leave your torque wrench sitting at any torque spec at all. It can throw off your calibration. Once you have all your lug nuts torqued on, make sure you air up your tires. Look on the driver's door jamb. You open up the driver's side door, and down on the bottom of the door jamb is going to be a sticker, and that says on the Kia Niro Touring with the 18-inch wheels, the air spec is 36 psi. So on the Touring is 36 psi. Your tires might be different, so make sure that you check the door jamb on your car, and that's what the air pressure should be on all 4 tires. Make sure that you have all the wheels on the ground whenever you torque your lug nuts. I have them just touching the ground, not all the full weight of the vehicle on, just to keep it from spinning. You can have someone hold the brakes while it's up in the air, and that way you can torque all the lug nuts down. But I usually lower the vehicle down because I'm using a lift to where the wheels just touch the ground so they don't spin, and I can torque the lug nuts and then I'll lower it the rest of the way. But that's how you rotate the tires and kind of check your brakes on the Kia Niro. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and God bless. Now when you're done, when you don't have one, you can use a wrench, a large ratchet, not a wrench,